updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The Fed's threshold for tapering its asset purchase program may be met sooner than people think. That's the view of Dallas Fed Bank President Rob Kaplan. Kaplan has now penciled in an interest rate increase from the Fed next year. We have a move up in long-term interest rate today, 10-year Treasury now at 1.49% in yield. So we're up more than 2.5 basis points on the session. We're a few moments away from the close of the equity session for Wednesday trading, and right now it looks like the equity market is mixed, with the Dow down about 0.1%, although the S&P 500 holding on to a slim gain, let's call it 0.1%. NASDAQ Composite higher by 0.2%. Small caps outperforming. The Russell 2000 is up about 0.5%. A CDC advisory committee is reviewing data on messenger RNA vaccines and their possible connection to heart inflammation. Apparently, more than 1,200 cases have been reported. Shares in many of the mRNA vaccine makers are trading lower, and I will include on that list Pfizer and Moderna shares, both moving lower. A little bit of strength coming through in the dollar right now, and quite a bit of weakness in the Japanese yen. We are trading 111 even against the greenback. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, just about 10 and a half minutes left in today's trading session. It's been a relatively calm one and a tight trading range. We'll talk about that in just a moment. We are seeing equities, though, take a leg down here as we get closer to the closing bell. Let's get to it, though, with Eleanor Reed. She's partner and head of corporate strategy at Gideon Strategic Partners, and she joins us on the phone from Raleigh, North Carolina. Gideon, by the way, is a financial advisor, and it's great to have her here because one of the things she's really watching closely is crypto, which is something we are obsessed with. Eleanor, so nice to have you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Carol, for having me.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. First of all, in terms of, let's go right to it because crypto is something that's on your radar. First of all, your clients, you guys are advisors. How often are you having conversations with your clients when it comes to crypto?
You know, it's almost every day when we speak to some of our prospective clients, they're asking us about crypto. And as advisors who have to be responsible, we are doing our due diligence on several crypto funds at the moment, and those that make sense and would fit the profile of our client base, we'll probably bring on board.
So right now, are you actually recommending to clients getting into any sort of crypto fund?
I am not personally, and I will tell you why. Right now, there's just so much volatility in the crypto space, and it's primarily because people see the opportunity for short-term gains and outsized gains in particular. That's going to change rather drastically, I believe, as regulation begins to pick up pace.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like it's a double-edged sword in some ways because regulation gives it, maybe it's not a double-edged sword, but regulation gives it some legitimacy, but it also reins it in, right?
Correct. Correct. So I've been in the industry even prior to coming to Gideon. I headed up the operations for a blockchain company several years ago. And, you know, this was when the SEC and the banks were really just trying to get their feet wet in the industry and beginning to really understand what was going on in the space. And so, you know, they pretty much have taken a let's be more than cautious approach, which is why you've seen a lot of firms shut down or paying a lot of fines early on, even without having firm definitions of what crypto is and how to delineate the definition of different types of cryptocurrencies.
Well, Eleanor, help me understand the conversations that your clients are having with you right now when they are asking about crypto. Is it one of, okay, should I add this to my portfolio as sort of a ballast, and it's funny to use the term ballast because it's been so look, it's been so volatile, but a replacement for gold, as people have talked about in recent years, or is it one of FOMO, where they're like, wait a second, I see so many people whose stake in Bitcoin has increased so much in such a short time, the last 6 weeks notwithstanding, why aren't we doing this?
Exactly. I think what we're seeing mostly is the latter. A lot of folks that are saying, we either, got our feet wet in it several years ago, we bought a little, and now it's really taken off, and they're proud of how well they've done over the last few years, and therefore, are you doing it to help us continue our investments in the crypto space? And others are just coming on board and really getting jazzed up, so to speak, about the opportunity there, at least the short-term opportunity that they see. Some don't fully understand it. And so we try to go out of our way to help them better understand the difference between blockchain and its applications and how cryptocurrency is meant to facilitate blockchain uses. But we're not there yet as a market overall. People are just kind of riding a wave until, as I said, regulation comes to rein some of this in.
Well, there's also tons of crypto coins out there. I'm trying to think, was it our own Mike McClone, who covers commodities but also watches the cryptocurrency space very closely for us, Eleanor? I think he said there was something like 10,000 different types of crypto coins out there. There are a lot. And safe to say that there are probably some investors thinking, okay, is there something out there that is going to provide the returns that Bitcoin, despite the volatility, has returned some investors who got in pretty early? Is there something out there? How do you see the vast space of altcoins that are out there, maybe above and beyond Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is the way I look at any other type of investment: equity, fixed income, private alternatives. And you have to go back to fundamentals. And that is probably the safest way to approach this for those that are considering more of a long-term hold. And the term we used to use is HODL, right? Hold on for dear life. For those that are looking for a more long-term hold, you really need to look at the fundamentals of the company itself. What are they seeking to do? Who is the management team? How experienced are they? How well are they funded? And then, what's the use case for the cryptocurrency that they're offering to the market?
Does the recent volatility that we've seen, down 50% as of yesterday, it's back up today, at one point yesterday from its recent high, does that change the conversation, though? Does that make investors and potential clients of yours say, okay, wait a second, it's a little too hot to handle?
You would think it would. I think people are still asking the question, especially as we've seen over the last few days, with the announcement coming out of China that they're broadening their mining shutdowns. But I think the mining piece, on the one hand, you would look at it as a competitive advantage, and so it might be a good thing. But I think what people are reading into that is that this is one of the few steps towards further regulation and clampdown that we're seeing in several countries, and therefore they want to start taking their gains before it drops too far off the map.
Do you feel like when it comes to crypto or altcoins and understanding this whole space that the best is yet to come, and that maybe the companies that have lasting stay in this space, or maybe the currencies or commodities, however you want to describe to crypto, have yet to come, that we haven't seen them yet?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I compare the blockchain market with the internet. If you remember when the internet came on board, it was like everybody and their mom had some kind of internet stake. People were spamming each other, trying to sell anything and everything over the internet, and all sorts of companies sprung up that could provide some level of benefit. And the stars of the internet back in the day, early on, Netscape, AOL, look at where they are today, and in comparison. So I believe Bitcoin and Ethereum are great use tokens. I think it's a good idea to hold on to some, but I would imagine that much like the transitions away from some of those early names in the internet to Google and how ubiquitous that is at this point, we're going to see some other coins coming up that may replace or at least minimize the effects of the earlier coins.
Just in the 10 seconds we have left with you, what is the next? What is the Google when it comes to blockchain, though?
That's the big question. We don't quite know yet, but I would imagine that someone is working on it right as we speak.
Well, that's a good way to look at it, a new perspective. Eleanor, thank you. Really appreciate it. Eleanor Reed, she's partner and head of corporate strategy at the financial advisory firm Gideon Strategic Partners, on the phone from Raleigh, North Carolina. We say this as we are watching the markets, the equity markets, taking a little bit of a leg down here. We're moving towards our lows here of the day on the S&P 500. It is down just about 4 points. Dow off about 61. And you've got the NASDAQ just about holding on to a gain, 0.1%. It is up about 18 points. Coming up next, we'll be joined by our Bloomberg TV team for Beyond the Bell on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg TV, and on YouTube. We're counting you down to the close on this Wednesday.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
About 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day, Caroline Hyde, Taylor Riggs, Sonali Basak counting you down to the closing bell to take us beyond that bell. A global simulcast for you. Carol Massa, Tim Stenwick, of course, bringing together our Bloomberg television, radio, YouTube audiences to talk about and get excited the volumes that are down about 11% and a market that is trading flat, Carol.
Yeah, trading flat, very low volume. Take a look at the range. What a tight range that we see in the S&P 500, about a 0.3 swing, 0.3% in terms of the highs and lows of the days. I don't know, maybe investors are just so confused about all the Fed speakers, it's hard to focus on kind of where we go next, Tim.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that, Carol, because we did see stocks move lower just slightly after we heard from Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic. He said that the Fed could decide to slow its asset purchases in the next few months, and that he favored lifting rates in 2022. But then for most of the day, we're positive until really just the last few minutes, Taylor.
Tim, really, really important comments, Sonali, out of Mr. Bostic there. A few things that caught my eye was the tapering decision he's saying could be in 3 to 4 months. That sets us up nicely for maybe a Jackson Hole September timeline. And then, of course, Sonali, to the point of tapering may not mirror the last tapering. We know that the last tapering was equally weighted between MBS and Treasuries. There has been, as of late, a shift towards focusing on some of those mortgage-backed securities, given, of course, some of the housing data that we continue to see hot this morning.
Yeah, absolutely, Taylor. And we see even the riskiest of traders are not doing all that much. We see Bitcoin barely budging here. We see meme stocks. Some of them are actually down on the day. And we're waiting on more word, not just from the central bank, but also from Washington. We heard from Gary Gensler today on more rules ahead.
Yeah, we're going to be digging into that in a moment. Right here, right now, I'm looking at an S&P 500 that closes lower by 4 points. So I'm afraid no new record high today. We see the Dow off by 0.2%, but the NASDAQ still managing to push on higher. New record for big tech. 18 points higher on the day, 0.1%. Meanwhile, the Russell 2000 also clung onto its gains. We had the likes of key sectors helping bounce it higher, 0.3% higher. But as you said, Tim, just towards the end of trade, we suddenly seem to fizzle that sort of risk on sentiment, Taylor.
Well, Amanda Gordon is writing about the Hamptons parties. They are back. So maybe investors have already headed out to the East End. We definitely did see, as we mentioned earlier, low volume. Finishing at our lows of the day, we haven't seen this a lot. I feel like in the last couple of minutes and in the last couple of weeks, we have seen the last part of trading. We tend to see some upward momentum, Tim, but that's not how it played out today.
Yeah, it certainly didn't play out that way. Taylor, I know you're taking a look at what you're seeing in fixed income this afternoon. Take us into it.
Yeah, I'm going to first start with some of the equity movers that we continue to follow as we take a look at some of the individual sectors, Carol, and sort of hitting on that theme of when we divided out between the gainers and the losers. Even in the gainers, there are some hints of redness going on. It's autos and banks and semiconductors in the lead. It's Tesla, Ford, GM. Otherwise, it's all of the classic, perhaps maybe safe havens with equipment, some of the technology. Those are up anywhere from 0.3% to, well, the autos, which are up more than 4%. Carol, I'll take you down just quickly to some of the losers. And, well, it's food and beverage, it's professional.
Among my gainers today, Tesla in particular, the stock was up 5.3%, pretty much finishing at its highs of the session. Check it out, taking the top spot, I should say, the Tesla Model 3 on cars.com, American-made index for 2021. It's the first time that we had an EV take the top spot. Taylor mentioning auto companies. Ford also had a better day up on the day. Their Mustang came in second place. The Tesla Model Y took third place in that ranking. Got to talk a little bit about energy. It was a bright spot in today's trade. Nat gas prices rallying today. Occidental Petroleum benefiting as a result. That stock was up almost 3% here. Actually, was up 3% by the close. PVH, I just want to mention, it's an apparel footwear company. Flurry of headlines. The company talked about cutting its fiscal year revenue forecast, but it is selling a bunch of its brands, and it's going to use that to buy back stock. Stock was up almost 3%. AMC, I wanted to mention it. It was up 5% at its highs. It's a meme stock favorite. We know that of the Reddit retail crowd, but by the end of the day, Tim, it was just up a hair.
I got a meme stock for you in just a second, but I want to start with Fannie Mae, down more than 31% today. Shares tanking. We've been covering this all day after the Supreme Court said it would not allow Fannie Mae shareholders to share in the gains that the agencies have accrued since the depth of the 2008 financial crisis, sends the case back to lower courts. Torchlight Energy Resources. We have done this one as a gainer or a decliner each and every day this week because it has moved a lot. It was down more than 29% today. Yesterday, down more than 29% as well. Still up by more than 100% so far this month, though. Moderna down more than 4%. This as a CDC advisory committee is reviewing data related to cases of myocarditis and pericarditis, those heart conditions that have been associated with a small number of people who have taken mRNA vaccines. And Berkshire Hathaway, down nearly 0.8%. I just want to talk about a couple Warren Buffett stories today. We learned today, very early this morning, Warren Buffett has donated $4.1 billion to 5 foundations, also stepping away from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, his seat on the board there, Caroline.
The age of 90 and halfway through giving away those Berkshire Hathaway shares, we understand, of course, is a philanthropic man. I'm also looking at what's down on the day in terms of FX for you, Tim. And I'm looking at currencies that are really feeling the pain of late. The Japanese yen, we haven't seen it this low since, well, amidst the pandemic. And this is, of course, as we see a real bid for US assets, maybe because we're going to see rate hikes sooner than anywhere else. This is a story of perhaps a desire to get into US bonds. Yields have been hedging a little bit higher, but we do see the Japanese yen off by 0.3%. What outperforms in terms of your FX for our radio audience, I'm looking at an Aussie dollar up 0.25%. Kiwi, the New Zealand dollar, up 0.25% as well. That as commodities start to get a bit of a bid back. Oil actually just pared its gains as perhaps it enters technical overbought territory. Remember, we've been holding above $70 for a while now in terms of Brent crude. We just managed to hold up 0.7% as we saw inventories pull back. Nat gas is on the upside, zinc is on the upside, steel. We're seeing copper, Dr. Copper pulling right back as well. It's on the higher side, so clearly a bid back for commodities after that significant sell-off last week. And so was a significant sell-off, well, not much of a significant one, but certainly we saw bonds pull back a little bit in terms of sovereign debt in the US, Taylor.
What I love is your inventory is my inventory, Caroline. That is all of what
tomato,
on this program. But when you talk about some of this sell-off, you're right. It's more than an inch. It's 2 to 3 to 4 basis points across the curve. But interesting comments, Carol, given that we're at now 27 basis points on the 2-year, some of those comments about Raphael Bostic and maybe some mixed messages by the Fed, and not mixed messages, but different tones of voices from different members. All as inflation expectations, they had been rolling over, and then you get a slight uptick again today on some of these comments that maybe this is happening sooner than we thought.
Yeah, really started at the short end of the yield curve, that 2-year note in particular. And listen, we care about what Bostic has to say. He's a voting member, and we have to remember as we hear these comments, you know, who's voting when it comes to the FOMC. I do wonder, though, let's go forward to tomorrow. We have a big batch of economic news. On the labor front, we also get Jay Powell on the Fed's favorite read when it comes to inflation. We're talking about PCE. That might give us some more clues about which one of these Fed speakers, Shanali, is right.
Yeah, Carol, you've been talking about what's happening at the central bank. We mentioned Gary Gensler, but what will he be looking at? He made it clear that he's going to be doing more to keep a tab on large asset managers. That means more disclosures. Investors want to know who's looking after them. He says this is what he had to say.
Well, I think there's trillions of dollars of assets under management now calling for greater and consistent disclosure around climate risk. And what I've also asked staff to take up disclosures around human capital, the most important, really fundamental asset of a company, the people that work there.
There you have it. SEC Chair Gary Gensler right there. Look, guys, it's all about disclosure. Today's big take, it's all about SPACs, and it's about disclosures associated with SPACs. It's a really important read. I encourage everybody to check it out. But the big question is to what extent do investors actually know what they're getting into? And of course, the SEC wants to make sure that investors have the proper disclosures.
Barry Sternlicht, of course, echoing similar comments about peak SPAC. Caroline, at least when it comes to Clover Health and some of the Reddit-fueled gains that we continue to see. And it is not just a Reddit-fueled SPAC, but it is, in many cases, sort of a meme or a gamification of Bitcoin and crypto that we continue to see. Caroline, we bounced off, I hear, a very strong technical level yesterday.
Don't you remember when Gary Gensler was first being thought of for the head of the SEC? Everyone was like, he loves crypto. Teaches about it. He's going to be really lax on it. No, thank you. It looks as though he is going to be taking it seriously. But really what's affecting crypto is China's reaction to Bitcoin and the overall cryptocurrencies. It's pushback. Some theories here in the US is actually, hey, that's quite a good thing. It brings mining onshore to the United States. It means that it can be regulated here. But we're seeing, of course, that technical level being bounced off. We're above that 28,000 level. And many feel actually that, what is it, a death cross? Do they teach that in the CFA at the moment, Shonali? But they see like when you hit that sort of death cross level, which is when, what is it, Taylor, 50-day moving average moves below your 200-day?
Nailed it every time, Caroline.
All right, she goes off to the next level. Well done, well done. All right, that's going to do it for our cross-platform coverage on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg TV, and on YouTube. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
It's just one of those periods where we are trying to make sense of SPACs, of meme stocks. I think regulators are trying to figure it out, and it's just one of those times where we're not quite sure what comes next in terms of markets, in terms of the economy. There's a lot of questions.
Well, we're going to get some clarity tomorrow with the data dump. We're also going to get some clarity next week because, Carol, it's already time for monthly jobs. Can you believe it? Next week.
Believe it. Is it next week already?
Yeah.
Is it?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're right.
I know.
First Monday of the month. Yeah, so that'll be a big one. And we've seen a couple of months in a row where we've kind of missed the mark. And so they've been disappointing. And that is something Jay Powell has pointed out, that was a bit of a surprise. But that's going to be really important of getting those 7 million plus Americans back to work.
And of course, the end of the quarter coming soon. So we're going to start hearing from companies reporting.
We will indeed. Talk about a data dump. We'll get a lot of information. You have a good night.
Thank you. You too. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Let's get a check on world and national news. For that, let's head over to Nancy Lyons. She's in our D.C. studio. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Well, after taking heat from Republicans for several weeks, the White House announced today Vice President Kamala Harris will be heading to the U.S.-Mexican border on Friday, along with Homeland Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the trip was added after Homeland Security assessed it would be the appropriate time for a visit.
We didn't want to have anyone visit at a time where it'd be disruptive to efforts and progress being made on the ground, but they made that assessment, and she had said just a few weeks ago that she'd be open to going to the border.
Psaki says up until now, Harris has been focusing her efforts on improving economic and living conditions in the countries where migrants are coming from. Well, 9 months after the country locked down to get through the pandemic, the U.S. birth rate plummeted. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports.
U.S. births fell by 8% in a month, and for the full year, data from the CDC show the birth rate dropped 4%, the largest decline since 1973. The drop marked an acceleration in declining birth rates in the U.S. Overall, the birth rate in the U.S. has been dropping since the Great Depression, and last year, 25 states recorded more deaths than births. Analysts say the drop in births and the jump in deaths will have long-term consequences for the population growth. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The creator of McAfee antivirus software was found dead in a Spanish prison today, just hours after a Spanish court okayed his extradition to the U.S. on tax evasion charges. John McAfee had been in prison since last October. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar, and joining me right now is Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. You sent me this story. You have lived in California. It is the home of almonds.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things that you have to know about almond production is how water intensive this crop happens to be. I think one almond requires a little more than a gallon of water. And if you look at what it takes to produce a pound of almonds, we're talking about 1,900 gallons per pound. That's crazy, right? Many nuts are water intensive, but this comes as California is going through a period of severe drought right now. And I think the Bloomberg story that we're talking about here is looking at how almond farmers in the Central Valley have been forced to basically reduce their acreage because they cannot find the water to grow the crop. And if you look at the total number of almonds that are really involved in global production, I think the annual almond harvest in California accounts for about 80% of what's globally produced in terms of almond. Do you watch Bill Maher at all?
Well, I used to. I don't watch him as much as I used to. I know
Maher
you like
last
watching
Friday
him.
on his program, which is based in L.A., was going on about this. He was very critical of the almond crop because of how water intensive it is. You know, a lot of the criticism when it comes to water usage focuses on areas like the Bay Area or L.A. And Maher was saying, wait a minute, can we have a conversation about what industrial agriculture uses in terms of water?
I just did a panel at Milken. It's all about, our evolving food system and figuring out more sustainable ways of farming. And this is a big part of it because basically the UN has come out with numbers about the amount of land that we have left if we don't change our farming ways. And this story particularly talks about some of these farms that are ripping out, right, the almond trees because it's too dry and they can't keep them going. And so there's got to be better ways, especially if we want to figure out how to sustainably feed the world in the future.
Check out the book, The Dreamt Land by Mark Arox. It's the grand history of water in California. Good read.
You're amazing, Doug Krisner. He's so well read. It's just unbelievable.
He's a Californian.
He is. This is Bloomberg.
headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So we had a bit of a move up in long-term interest rates today on the notion that the Fed's threshold for tapering asset purchases may be met sooner than people think. That was the view of Dallas Fed Bank President Rob Kaplan today. And at the same time, Atlanta Fed Bank President Raphael Bostic said the Fed could decide to slow its asset purchases in the next few months. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York at a yield of just under 1.49%. In terms of the equity market, we were mixed. The Dow down 0.2%, the S&P 500 weaker by 0.1%, although the NASDAQ composite climbed about 0.1%. The Russell 2000 outperforms. We had the Russell up 0.3% today. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser in our Interactive Brokers studio. So real estate, we talk about it a lot. And I recently hosted the Real Estate in a Virtual World panel. We did it from the Bloomberg Qatar Economic Forum. Some of the biggest names in the sector sat down to talk about what's happening in global real estate. Here's some of that conversation.
We are truly going around the world when it comes to looking at global real estate and what's going on, some of the trends. Shay Khalid, Bruce Flatt, and Rob Spire, thank you so much for being with us. This is what I would call a dream team when it comes to talking real estate. What I want to start with is the truth about what's going on in real estate, because there have been over the past year a lot of conversations about doomsday scenarios, about people leaving major cities, a lot of working from home or hybrid working, so we won't need as much office space, about people moving away from gateway cities. So I want to get to the truth of it. Bruce, let me start with you. Is it a case that we're not going to go back to our office? Or if I look around New York, it feels like a lot of people have already moved back.
Look, it's life is about phases. People have to adjust. They're all coming back to the office. It's just inevitable. And but people have to do it in phases. They thought they couldn't come back. Then they thought they were going to partly work from home. Eventually, they're all going to be back to the office. We're seeing it everywhere in the world. You can see it in the cities that are reopening already across the world. And it's just happening at a slower pace in some places. But look, everything's opening up where the vaccines are working.
Shay Khalid, come on in on this. Do you agree you're seeing everybody come back, or do you feel like that there might still be some dramatic changes when it comes to real estate generally?
I do echo what Bruce said. I think in phases, as we have planned also here in Qatar, many of the companies, agencies, organizations are coming back into phases, and I see with the vaccine, people getting vaccinated, even a larger pool of people getting together in terms of meetings, events, what have you. I think we cannot get away from the concept of the workspace. The concept of workspace is for many occupier is to pool talent and to promote collaboration and innovation. So this concept we see in Qatari DR, where I am a chairman of, we don't see a change from that. I think we're getting back to normal. I think as a growing company like Qatari DR, it's important that we maintain the attracting talented people, and in the same time, as a growing company, we are developing and training national as a successor for the future, and we cannot do that remotely.
Rob, is it 3 for 3? Do you agree that people are coming back from the office, or does something change a little bit in terms of how we look at the office space, maybe how we use it or how much we use it and where we're using it?
Companies are really struggling to define what a hybrid workplace means and how to implement that in an equitable way. Does it mean that nobody works Mondays and Fridays? Does it mean, as one big company's doing, you tell people which 3 days they come to the office based on a computer algorithm? Do you give every employee their own choice? How does that work? So I think companies' approaches have been very fluid, depending on seasonality month by month. And it has been a real struggle if it's not remote or in the office, and it's a balance of the two, how to actually execute. But I'd give you a fact point from our kind of on the ground experience. We were lucky enough to buy a building in Sunnyvale a couple of months ago, at a 50% discount to the pre-COVID value. Within 30 days of closing, we have 2 tech companies who are looking at potentially taking the whole campus. Now, 6 months ago, the whole world was writing off the Bay Area. Everybody was moving out, moving elsewhere. And the facts on the ground are most of the big tech companies have added extraordinary numbers to their workforce, and they need places to put them. Nobody's making the bet in actuality that they're not bringing people back to the workplace.
Well, that's what I want to get to and kind of make some sense out of, because we've done a lot of stories, certainly here at Bloomberg, about people leaving Silicon Valley, that the big tech companies are saying you can kind of work anywhere. Bruce, who is it that's going to be in demand for office space? Is it the same as it was pre-pandemic in terms of what we see post-pandemic? What signs are you seeing?
Look, I think the one thing that people have forgotten about when they think of office space is normally workforces, the GDP of the world grows, and you need more space to house people. And what happens when you have a slowdown is that nobody builds buildings. And there really hasn't been anything globally launched for 18 months, which means that the amount of buildings coming on is just getting less and less. And over time, what you're going to see is demand come back and the amount of supply diminish, which means that you're going to have a whole cycle start over again. And our view is that this is very positive for real estate longer term, and we're continuing to invest globally. And you can see it in each of the markets that open up. You start to see cap rates come down because people understand that the offices are going to be full again.
And that was Bruce Flatt speaking right there, CEO of Brookfield Asset Management. You also heard from Rob Spire, President and CEO of Tishman Speyer, and Sheikh Khalid, who is the head of the Qatari real estate investment company. These are 3 heavyweights with investments around the world in commercial and residential real estate, and just giving us kind of a gut check when it comes to what's happening in the real estate market, especially as we grapple with how is real estate used going forward when it comes to post-pandemic. And no surprise to probably hear some optimism from the 3 of them, but nonetheless, they are seeing things firsthand. You can hear that whole and see that whole panel. You can do it by going to BloombergLive.com. Again, that was from the Qatari Economic Forum. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about investing when it comes to the cyberspace world, those companies that are providing solutions against cyber attacks. That's next.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
So according to ZDNet, a new survey finds that 80% of companies that pay to end ransomware attacks will be subjected to cyber attacks again, and often from the same hackers. We're going to explore that. We heard from Michael Chertoff a little bit earlier, former Secretary of Homeland Security. We're going to check in with the founder of Evolution Equity Partners about some of his investments when it comes to cybersecurity and enterprise software companies. We'll get to that in just a moment. First up, back to your top business stories, some of the news after the close. Here is Doug Krisner.
Hey, Carol. So we had to move up in long-term interest rates today. The Fed's threshold for tapering asset purchases may be met sooner than people think. That's the view of Dallas Fed Bank President Rob Kaplan. He has penciled in a rate increase next year. We also heard today from Atlanta Fed Bank President Raphael Bostic. He was saying the Fed could decide to slow asset purchases in the next few months. 10-year Treasury, well behaved. We were up, yes, only 2 basis points in yield, last quoted in New York at just under 1.49%. The equity market was mixed. We had the Dow weaker by 0.2%, S&P down 0.1%, but the NASDAQ composite rises about 0.1% on the day. Comcast is reportedly wrestling with whether to buy or build in order to become a streaming powerhouse. The Wall Street Journal quoting sources close to Comcast CEO Brian Roberts, and they say he doesn't feel the need to seek a merger, but he's scoping out options. And the ideas on the table include a potential tie-up with Viacom CBS or an acquisition of Roku. Today, we had shares in Roku rally 4.5%. Viacom CBS shares up nearly 2.7%. But for their part, Comcast Class A shares were down about 3.7%. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you so much, Doug. So Gartner is forecasting worldwide security and risk management spending to exceed $150 billion this year. It's grew about 6.4% last year. So some of this, Gartner says, reflects continuing demand for remote worker technologies and cloud security. It's the environment that we are working within. Let's get some thoughts, though, on this space and the investment opportunities as a result. Richard Seawald is founder and managing partner of Evolution Equity Partners. It's an international VC investor focusing on cybersecurity and enterprise software companies, has over $750 million in assets under management. He joins us on the phone from Zurich, Switzerland. Fingers crossed that it's a clean connection. Richard, nice to have you here with us.
Hi, Carol. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Hear you loud and clear. So I think we're ready to go. And, I think so you raised some important points there. And, we're going to talk about those in greater detail. So, let's kick it off.
Back at you. It is a clean line. And let's get going, as you say. So first of all, there is so much going on. I talked with Mr. Chertoff, the former Homeland Security Secretary, at a Bloomberg event, and he says the big one is yet to come, despite what we've seen with the Colonial Pipeline and JBS Meat, and we continue to see the frequency and the severity of cyber attacks picking up. How do you see it?
I would tend to agree, and I think a good way of looking at what the future holds is actually going back a few years and understanding how we got to where we are today. So if you look at the last 20 years of the development of the cybersecurity space as a market and the nature of the threat, there's been a significant and consistent trajectory of a more, as you mentioned, a more sophisticated, frequent, and pointed attack to infrastructure, enterprises, and government around the world. So when you turn back the clock 20 years, in and around the post 9/11 era, interestingly, the security market is a cottage industry, $3 billion of spend, relatively small vis-a-vis the numbers that you indicated just before. Over that first decade, the market grows exponentially from $3 billion to $50 billion, and so does the nature of the attack, driven in part because of the increase in connectivity. But as we move from 2010 to 2020, the nature of the attack in the 2008 financial crisis also begins to become more significant and more threatening to infrastructure and enterprises globally. We start to see some of the same issues arise post 9/11, post 2008, and then again in the COVID-19 era. So some of the consistent factors there in post-crisis era, cyber attacks and fraud tend to increase quite significantly. And you start to see next generation attacks emerge. And those next generation attacks layered on the factor of work from home, migration to the cloud, accelerated digitalization, positions the current market particularly vulnerable for those types of next generation attacks. And I'll pause there for any questions on that. There's a lot to talk about where we go from there.
All right, hold on a second. I do have to bring a headline to our listeners and viewers on YouTube. The United States to block some solar goods made in China's Xinjiang region. That province, very important to China's history, a Silk Road gateway to the West. And we know that there is a lot in terms of manufacturing going on there. But again, this is just another example of some of the tensions that still exist between the United States and China, specifically when it comes to goods, trade, and other. This is kind of a good setup, Richard. We've got about a minute. We've got to do some news, and then we'll come back. But China, you are watching China and their quest for quantum supremacy. Quantum supremacy is not something we talk about a lot here on Bloomberg, but we probably should.
Absolutely. I think when you look out 3 to 5 to 7 years, the likelihood that a quantum computer is in place that can cause and unravel some of the encryption algorithms that protect day-to-day communication, corporate secrets, government secrets start to become vulnerable. We've actually invested in a quantum cyber company that defends and protects against that vulnerability. But certainly, quantum is the elephant in the room. Companies are already buying software to protect against that potential vulnerability as quantum computers go live. Now, there's a lot of areas that relate to the current environment.
Right.
China
hang
and
on
our adversaries.
Richard, hang on for a second, because I do have to do some news, and then we'll come back and continue the conversation on the other side of the break. We're going to come back to Richard Seewald, founder and managing partner of Evolution Equity Partners, on the phone from Zurich, Switzerland. I did mention that headline, the U.S. to block some solar goods made in China's Xinjiang region, and obviously it's an interesting and important province for China in terms of manufacturing. It's also, and you know this from listening to Bloomberg, it is where we see the Uyghur population and other mostly Muslim ethnic groups in that northwestern region of Xinjiang. And so my guess is it's safe to say that that has something to do with it, because there are concerns about human rights violations against the Uyghur population by China. All right, let's get to world and national news. Nancy Lyons, she's in our D.C. bureau there in the nation's capital. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden will soon be speaking about tackling the rise in violence in the nation's cities with a focus on gun crimes. Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the administration says it needs to do something.
Today, the Biden-Harris administration is announcing a comprehensive strategy to combat violent crime and gun violence that targets the crime itself, implements preventative measures that are proven to reduce violent crime and attacks root causes, including by addressing the flow of firearms used to commit crimes.
Psaki says President Biden believes the rise in crime is unacceptable. A bipartisan group of House and Senate lawmakers is introducing a bill that would revamp the military justice system to better handle cases of sex assault and harassment. Congresswoman Jackie Spears says it is named after Vanessa Guillen, a soldier who was murdered and sexually assaulted at Fort Hood.
To take sexual assault cases and other major non-military felony crimes out of the chain of command and empower independent and trained military attorneys to make the crucial decision of whether to try a service member for such crimes.
It's estimated that each year 20,000 service members are sexually assaulted, but only a third report it. A member of the Oath Keepers is admitting he conspired to riot at the U.S. Capitol January 6th. Graydon Young of Florida also agreed to cooperate with U.S. prosecutors. And John McAfee, the creator of the McAfee antivirus software, has been found dead in his jail cell near Barcelona, Spain. His death comes just hours after a court issued a preliminary ruling in favor of his extradition to the U.S. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Let's get a little bit more clarity on that story. I broke some of the headlines a little bit, but I want to kind of fill in some of the details. Right now, joining me, too, is Bloomberg News Daybreak Asia anchor Doug Krisner. Doug, this just crossed the Bloomberg by our team, Jenny Leonard, Jeffrey DeLuey, Brian Eckhouse, and Ari Nader. And it's about the U.S. looking to block some solar goods made in China's Xinjiang region. And we know this is where we find the Uyghur Muslims.
Yeah, the minority community in Xinjiang. Yeah, this is the Western community. Forced labor is one of the things that's involved here. And it's not just in the solar panel industry, although you're right, Carol, the Biden administration is taking some steps to bar some solar products made in this region in China from entering the market in the United States. There's also this issue of cotton. Xinjiang is one of the largest areas in the world where cotton is grown. Also in that area across the border is Kazakhstan. They also have a lot of cotton production involved there. But again, the issue of forced labor. And so when you get the issue of human rights and potential human rights violations, this is causing not only the administration to pivot, but some companies that are involved in production in this region to pivot as well.
Yeah, exactly. And factories in Xinjiang where advocacy groups and a panel of UN experts say the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities have been subjected to, as you mentioned, Doug, human rights abuses, forced to work against their will, produce roughly half of the global supply of polysilicon. It's a material critical for solar panels and semiconductors. China has denied the allegations, saying they're an attempt to undermine successful businesses, but this is a move that could force U.S. companies to find equipment elsewhere. And this again gets to, some of the battles between the United States and China.
Yeah, most definitely. And, the fact that the U.S. has been losing the war, as it were, in solar panel production, this has been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, exactly. Again, these are according to people familiar. A White House spokesman had no immediate comment on this report, but it is certainly something we will continue to monitor. Doug, thank you. Appreciate that. This is Bloomberg.
headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So you could make the case that last week the market was put on notice about the possibility of the Fed shifting its stance toward asset purchases. Well, today it looks as though the Fed's threshold for tapering those purchases may be met sooner than people think. That's according to Dallas Fed Bank President Rob Kaplan. He's penciled in a rate increase next year. And while we're talking about tapering, Atlanta Fed Bank President Raphael Bostic today saying the Fed could decide to slow asset purchases in the next few months, and he also favors lifting rates in 2022. Today, a reaction in the bond market, yes, but it wasn't that dramatic. A 10-year Treasury yielding 148 with a gain in basis point terms of about 2 basis points. Now, on the equity side of the ledger, we had the Dow giving back about 0.2%, the S&P 500 down about 0.1%, although the NASDAQ composite was higher today by 0.1%. A CDC advisory committee is reviewing data on messenger RNA vaccines and their possible connection to heart inflammation. So we had a number of the messenger RNA vaccine manufacturers moving lower today. Shares in Pfizer were down about 1.4%, and mRNA, that is the ticker on Moderna, those shares weaker today by more than 4.2%. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thanks for the update. I want to get back to our guest, Richard Seawald, founder and managing partner of Evolution Equity Partners. It's an international venture capital firm. They are focusing on cybersecurity companies, also enterprise software firms, and they have over $750 million in assets under management. Richard's still with us on the phone from Zurich, Switzerland. And forgive me, Richard, I had to cut you off, but we were talking about quantum supremacy and China and their mission to lead when it comes to that world. I mean, this is important. We're talking about, kind of computer advantages and performance over kind of existing computers. And we're talking about, crazy calculations, right? At crazy speeds, but it's able to give the person who has that, possesses that, certainly an advantage.
Absolutely, and I think when you think about the risk around quantum computing, actually there's present day risk. Quantum computers, at least the types of quantum computers that would pose threats to encryption algorithms that protect databases and secrets of governments and enterprises today, are probably not prone today. However, our adversaries are collecting data that's readily available, storing that data, and are positioning themselves to be able to decrypt that data once a quantum computer comes into play and is live. So the threat actually exists today, and companies are already arming themselves and protecting against that scraping of data and secretion of data that happens through cyber breaches and other methodologies. So we are already in the era of quantum computers, and the fact that quantum computers have impact on the way enterprises protect their intellectual property and secrets.
So tell us about the crop of companies that you are investing that you think will be the ones that will be protecting others going forward.
Absolutely. So I'll talk about two or three that respond directly to some of the threats and hacks that you've seen over the last 6 months. And when you think about SolarWinds, one of the things to understand about the SolarWinds hack has been that the attack surface around companies and software developers has expanded exponentially over the last couple of years. And what that means is while software developers are building software, they're prone to hackers who inject malware into that software development phase, and then the supply chain of software and is prone to those security hacks. So that's what happened in SolarWinds. We invested in the company called Blue Bracket, leading a Series A round earlier this year. Blue Bracket addresses that risk head on, providing security tools to dev and SecOps engineers to protect against that increasing threat for developers in terms of developing technology. So it's one of the things that the presidential executive order addressed, cybersecurity and the software supply chain. Blue Bracket addresses that head on. Second company that we've invested in a number of years, a company called Security Scorecard. Security Scorecard is the Moody's of cybersecurity. They rate up to 20 million companies worldwide on their cyber posture. It allows for chief security officers to translate cyber risk to boards of directors, an essential, I would say, chasm that has been broken down with the technology that security software provides. And that's important because board members need to understand cyber risk in order to deploy investment into the cyber infrastructure that's required to defend against these advanced threats. I mentioned Quantum, a company there that we've invested, Arctic, defending against that potential of a quantum hack. The company, in fact, announced a SPAC merger and will be a public company on NASDAQ over the next couple of months.
And they're actually, help me out there, my understanding is they're involved with launching some satellites, right, to protect against growing hacking threats.
Absolutely. So one of the ways to protect against the quantum hack is to be able to effectively distribute keys such that the key infrastructure, cryptographic key infrastructure, becomes more defensible. And they're able to do that with novel technology that they developed and providing that type of key distribution through satellites, which can be distributed around the world, safely protecting devices, computers, and other endpoint products that are out there.
Right, so essentially a backbone of encryption keys or secure keys, if you will, within data centers around the world. It's really fascinating how this is evolving. How do you see it ultimately, Richard, playing? At some point, is there an aggregator, a sales force of the cybersecurity world, or will it continue, in your view, to be these kind of young startups that are kind of trying to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to the cybersecurity world? And just got about 40 seconds left here, just quickly.
Sure. Great question. So I think you're seeing an increase in the number of cybersecurity companies that are going public. With that, you're going to see continued consolidation so that these platforms are positioned to upsell and cross-sell products into their installed base. You're going to see a Salesforce.com type of cybersecurity company that's an aggregator that has end-to-end product capability. And I think you're already starting to see that in some of the publicly listed platforms out there. We're going to see more of that as time goes on.
Listen, this was a great conversation, and I hope we can get you back because it's certainly an evolving and developing world, but certainly a very crucial world, as we have seen. Richard, thanks. Richard Seawald, founder and managing partner, Evolution Equity Partners, on a very clear line from Zurich, Switzerland. So it was so good to get his thoughts. Joe Matthew is coming up on Sound On. Joe, what's on tap?
Hey, Carol, we're going to start with Fannie and Freddie. Did you see these stocks today? Down hard after this Supreme Court ruling. Will be joined for the ins and outs here by Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr, as well Bloomberg White House correspondent Nancy Cook. It's going to be bad news for the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. He's on his way out already.
Well, Joe, it's like, what are they? Are they government entities? Are they publicly held companies? It's like these
quasi. I like that word.
Quasi. All right, have a good show. Joe Matthew coming up on Sound On. For the whole Business Week team, have a good evening, everyone.